So today we're going to break down a pretty wild hypothetical scenario. It's a story that's all about power, global resources, and the very limits of international law. We're talking about the story of how the United States military could, in a not-so-distant future, literally kidnap a sitting head of state.
All right, so picture this. The date is January 3rd, 2026. It is 2 o'clock in the morning. In Florida, a president is watching a live feed on a screen. But this isn't some action movie. No, this is a real-time military operation, and it's all unfolding thousands of miles from home.
And the target of this whole operation? It's not just some high-value individual. We're talking about the elected president of a sovereign nation, who's fast asleep in his own home, with absolutely no idea what is about to happen.
According to the source material, this is what the US president said after watching the entire thing go down. It was just like watching television. It's a pretty chilling statement, and it perfectly sets the stage for the surreal story we're about to unpack. Okay, let's get right into it. This is the blow-by-blow breakdown of something called Operation Absolute Resolve, a hypothetical, incredibly high-stakes raid on the residence of Venezuelan President Nicolás Maduro.
The whole operation is described with just surgical military precision. So first, you have stealth helicopters flying just 100 feet off the ocean, totally invisible to radar. Then, bam, a cyber attack hits, and the entire capital city, Caracas, is plunged into darkness. With the city blind, airstrikes take out all the air defenses, which clears the way for elite commandos to drop right onto the target. And get this, the source really emphasizes the unbelievable speed of this assault. Maduro is woken up by the commandos. He makes a desperate run for his safe room, but it's just too late. The soldiers grab him before he can even shut the door. The whole capture, it takes less than 5 minutes. This is where things get truly unprecedented. A sovereign leader is literally taken from his home, flown to a U.S. warship, processed through Guantanamo Bay, and then, finally, brought to American soil in chains to face criminal charges. So, you have to be asking, why? Right? Why take such an extreme, drastic step? Well, the official justification, the story the White House presented to the world, was all about one thing: drug trafficking.
Now, the formal charge wasn't just simple drug trafficking. It was way more severe. It was narco-terrorism conspiracy, a really serious accusation that alleges Maduro had been actively helping cartels smuggle cocaine into the U.S. for decades.
And these are the specific, formal charges that become the entire legal basis for the operation. You've got an indictment out of New York for a cocaine conspiracy, plus some weapons charges. And with that paperwork in hand, the White House framed the whole military raid as simply a law enforcement function.
But the source material argues that this whole official story, it was just a cover. The real motive, it suggests, was a much, much older geopolitical prize: oil.
And this right here is really the heart of the matter. You see, Venezuela isn't just some random oil-producing nation. It has the largest proven crude oil reserves on the entire planet. That's more than Saudi Arabia, more than Iran, and way, way more than the United States.
Look, this conflict didn't just pop up out of nowhere. The source traces a full century of tension. It starts with U.S. companies dominating the industry. Then Venezuela nationalizes its resources under Hugo Chavez, and that leads to decades of sanctions that followed. This has been a long, slow-burning fight.
So, what you have here is this fundamental, head-on conflict. On one side, you have Venezuela saying, hey, this is our oil, it belongs to our people, and we have the sovereign right to control it. But on the other side, you've got U.S. corporate interests arguing that their refineries were literally built for Venezuelan crude, and that nationalization is a direct threat to their entire business. Now, the analysis we're looking at suggests that a quote from the president the day after the raid reveals everything. He called Venezuela's control of its own oil theft, a statement that is presented as the clearest possible evidence of the operation's true motive. So, as you can probably imagine, an operation like this does not go unnoticed. The international reaction was swift, it was widespread, and, well, it was overwhelmingly negative.
And we're not just talking about America's traditional adversaries here. No, allies and partners all across Latin America and Europe joined in to condemn it. They saw this as a direct attack on the very idea of a world that's supposed to be governed by laws, not just by raw force. Now, throughout all of this, the Trump administration insisted this was not an act of war. They kept calling it a simple law enforcement function. But the source material asks us to really question that claim just by looking at the sheer scale of the operation. I mean, you've got to ask yourself,
Does a law enforcement action really require deploying over 150 military aircraft from 20 different bases just to capture a single indicted person?
And does a police action typically kick off with bombing raids on a nation's capital? A raid that results in 40 casualties before you even get close to the primary target?
So the argument here is that this action wasn't just controversial, it was illegal on two fundamental levels. Domestically, it violated the U.S. Constitution because it completely bypassed Congress's authority to declare war. And internationally, it absolutely shattered the UN Charter's most basic principle, Article 2.4, the rule that says countries can't use military force against each other. I mean, that's the very bedrock of the modern international system, and it was designed specifically to prevent this exact kind of thing.
So what's the big takeaway from all of this? Well, it's not just the story of one raid. It's really about the dangerous precedent it sets, the signal it sends to the entire world about how power actually works.
What the source argues is that an operation like this reinforces a pretty scary worldview, one where international law is just a friendly suggestion, not a real requirement. It's a world where military and economic power are the only authorities that truly matter.
And that leaves us with one final and pretty critical question. If the most powerful nations can simply take whatever they want and justify it later, what does that mean for global stability? And more importantly, what does that mean for every other nation that isn't a superpower?